Story time of how I found out my boyfriend was cheating on me with my cousin. My boyfriend and I had been together for 2.5 years. His family loved me and my family loved him and they expected us to get married. Well, last year when COVID started, we were actually in different countries, so we didn't see each other for 3 months. During those 3 months, we FaceTimed 4 times a day, and we were always texting. He happened to be quarantining in our hometown, so both of our families were in the same place. I was quarantined in a different country. One day my cousin calls me and tells me that she met a really nice guy on a dating website. I was so happy for her because she had had bad luck with guys. Every single week, her and I would catch up on the phone and she would tell me how much she liked this guy, and how amazing their dates were, and how amazing he was in bed, how sweet and considerate he was. I couldn't be happier for her. Well, when I finally get back home, my boyfriend is super distant and cold. So naturally, I called my cousin and complained. She told me to give him space. She said I should just leave him alone. And so like an idiot, I did leave him alone. One day my cousin calls me and tells me to come over for dinner. When I got there, my boyfriend's car was parked in her garage. I thought it was just her nice way of trying to get us to talk. I walk in and catch them doing the dirty on the couch, come back for part 2. So I walk in on my cousin and my boyfriend doing the dirty on her couch. They quickly get up from the couch and get dressed. Of course, by that time, I'm in hysterics. I'm crying and yelling. My boyfriend instantly got on his knees and begged me for forgiveness. I went up to my cousin and I punched her right in the face. She wasn't expecting that. And I said, well, this is the guy that you've been dating, isn't it? She said yes, and that she was just trying to find the best way to tell me. And so she just thought the best way to tell me was to get me to walk in on her and him doing the dirty. I punched her again. My boyfriend came to her rescue though. Instantly went into hero mode, which made me even angrier, so I punched him too. I stormed out of her house and went back to my house. Well, I told my parents everything. And my dad went over to my uncle's house, my cousin's dad, and he told him everything. She was about to turn 19, so he took away her phone and her car. And I get a phone call from my ex, come back for Part 3. So my lying, cheating ex calls me and explains to me why he actually slept with my cousin. He said that he was so lonely and that he didn't know what to do, and that the closest thing to me he could find was my cousin. Right, as if that was any comfort to me. He said I should be grateful that I didn't cheat with someone else. I told him he had totally betrayed my trust and that I could never ever trust him again. And then he confessed that she was pregnant and that his parents wanted them to get married. He said he just wanted to give me a heads up. Then he said that we could still be together but just not tell anyone, so basically he wanted me to be his side piece. I couldn't believe the words that were coming out of his mouth. It was like I didn't know this man. Guess what I did? I recorded the entire conversation. So I went straight to my cousin and I let her listen to it. She was so shocked. She couldn't believe that he would offer to have me as a side chick. Well, I also let my uncle listen to it. He went to my ex's house and beat him up. Honestly, that made me sad, but he deserved it. They now have a baby and he's gained 50 pounds. Trust your instincts, girl, and always record your conversations. Also, how cute are my nails?
Am I wrong for refusing to pay my sister's bill and giving her information to the restaurant after she ditched me? This happened last night. My sister and her boyfriend recently moved to a town next to mine. I was excited as we'll be able to see more of each other now. Nearby, there's a downtown center that has a lot of shopping, restaurants, galleries, etc. There is one upscale restaurant that both my husband and I love. A dinner for 2 will run you about $200 to $250, so it's not a place we frequently go to. My sister called me last week and invited us out to dinner with them at the restaurant last night. I reminded her it was an upscale place and to take a look at the menu beforehand because they are pricey and we can go somewhere else, tons of other great places to choose from. She said they still wanted to go. We hadn't been there in a while, so we accepted. Dinner was great. At the end of the meal, my sister excuses herself to the bathroom, and when she doesn't come back relatively soon, her boyfriend goes to find her. After a while, neither of them comes back. We go to check for them and they are gone. I call and text her and she texts me back saying that they've left, but thanks for dinner. It was just as amazing as you said it would be. I asked her what she meant, but no response. I texted again asking if she really just stuck us with the bill and no response. I then texted that I never agreed to pay for them and that she had 30 minutes to come back to the restaurant, or I'll give the restaurant all her information and they will likely involve the police. No response. At the 30-minute mark, I called and texted and got no response. So I stayed true to my word. I paid for mine and my husband's portion and gave all her information to the manager for their portion and then left. The next day, she called me back upset that she's been getting calls from the restaurant asking her to come pay or they'll contact the police. No shit, Sherlock. I said I'm not surprised since she skipped out on her bill. She said she thought I was paying the tab since I paid for our dinners in the past. I have paid for her and me only, and dinners where the total tab was $60 max. I said this was obviously different than all the other times we met for dinner. This was all 4 of us and at an upscale restaurant, and I was not paying the $450 tab and she had to cover her portion. I reminded her that she invited us out and chose the restaurant. I specifically asked if she wanted to go somewhere else, but she is the one who insisted on going to this restaurant. She then said she thought I'd just pay, but when I asked the waiter for separate checks, she realized I wasn't and left for the bathroom planning to ditch. I said that since the restaurant hadn't contacted the police yet, all she had to do was go in and pay and it would be settled. She didn't want to do that because it would be too embarrassing and asked me to cover it. I again said no and that she had to take care of it herself. Clearly, I will not be paying for anything ever again. Our family has now gotten involved and I am being pressured to just pay the bill. So am I wrong if I don't and let the restaurant call the police? Oh my gosh. Yo, there's also an edit on here showing that the sister is in her mid-30s, so it's not like she's a teenager who can't pay for her stuff. This girl is a grown adult.
Story time about how my fiance broke off our wedding because of my best friend. My fiance and I had been together for 2 years, but my best friend and I had been friends for over 8 years, so I trusted her with my life. When my fiance and I met, she approved and she loved him. She was always looking for a new relationship because she could never commit to anyone. Eventually, I started feeling like she was envious of the relationship because I had found someone that I truly loved and that wanted to marry me. On the other hand, she was a serial dater and went out with so many guys she couldn't even keep track. One night we had a double date and she brought this new guy she met. Throughout the whole date, my fiance and my best friend were hitting it off, talking, making jokes, and I was actually really happy because I was happy they got along. Her date even noticed this and commented about how we should switch dates. I thought it was so funny. Well, little did I know that after that night, they actually started texting every once in a while. Inside jokes and memes, stuff like that. I did know about it and I thought it was really cute and I was so happy that they were getting along. After all, she was going to be the godmother of our future children. One day I saw she sent him a picture through text message. You'll never guess what I found. Come back for part 2. Part 2. So I noticed my best friend sent my fiance a picture and he was in the bathroom, so I went ahead and opened the picture. You guys, it was a selfie of her wrapped in a towel fresh out of the shower. So of course I show it to him and he's like, oh my god, why would she send that? He totally played it off like he had no idea why she would send that to him. So I call my best friend and I say, hey, did you just send my fiance this picture? She hesitated for a second and then she's like, oh my god, please don't tell me I sent him the picture by mistake. And I was like, yeah, you sent him a picture of you in a towel. And she said, I'm so mortified, I'm so sorry, I meant to send it to somebody else. And then she's like, you believe me, right? And part of me didn't want to, but part of me had to. I couldn't believe that my best friend would do that, so I said, yeah, of course I believe you. And she completely changed the subject and told me about the guy that she was currently seeing who she actually meant to send the picture to. A few weeks passed by and my fiance says he has to go on a work trip. Weirdly enough, she said she was going to go on a trip with the guy that she had just met. I asked her to meet the guy before they actually went on a trip and she said no because he's really shy. Can you believe they went on this trip together? Come back for part 3. Part 3. So my best friend and my fiance go on a trip by themselves behind my back. The whole time they were on their trips, I thought he was on a work trip and I thought she was with some dude. Because of the time difference, my fiance kept saying that he couldn't FaceTime, so we would just talk on the phone. The conversations were really short and he was acting really strange. He told me he was on a work trip to London, and because the whole thing felt so strange, I decided to call his mom. So I call her and I'm like, hey, where did he travel to again? And she replied, Aruba. I didn't say anything to her and I just got off the phone. I knew he was lying. And I knew my best friend was in Aruba. I connected the dots and realized they were both on a vacation together. The day that he was supposed to fly in, I showed up to the airport knowing that he was coming from Aruba. And I see them walking out to arrivals hand in hand. They saw me right away, and my best friend literally ran away. That's when he told me that he no longer wanted to be with me and that he wanted to be with my best friend. I had already paid for the wedding. He was such a coward. 2 months later, I found out she cheated on him, and he came back to me. I said no.
Am I wrong for ruining my work colleague's wedding and getting them arrested? The title sounds bad, but hear me out. I, 38 female, had 2 work colleagues, Mary and Adam, both in their late 20s, early 30s. Mary started in the company first and then she got Adam to join. They worked in different departments and Mary was in mine. Later, Mary left the company to pursue another career. When they started at the company, they were already married for a few years. Now, Mary is the kindest and loveliest person I've ever met. She was always polite, helpful, and would cheer anyone up. So it came to a shock when we found out that she is divorcing Adam because he has cheated on her. I had called to express how sorry I am that this has happened to her, and we've been talking daily ever since. I was impressed how well Mary holds herself in such a situation. She wouldn't badmouth Adam, and the only thing she mentioned was how her wedding dress and a few family heirlooms went missing when she was moving her stuff from their apartment. She thought they might be misplaced in a different box and will turn up eventually. A few years passed. I now work in the same department as Adam. He is a good work colleague but can be dismissive and ignorant sometimes. Adam invited me to his wedding with the lady, Chelsea, he cheated on Mary with. As the entire department was invited, I said yes, making sure Mary was okay with this. I've also told her where the wedding will be because it's not too far from where she lives and we can go grab some drinks after if she wanted to. On the day of Adam's wedding, I had noticed that Chelsea was wearing a similar dress that Mary had worn in the photos of her and Adam's wedding years ago. So without thinking, I had snapped a picture and I sent it to Mary with the caption saying, "Doesn't this dress look familiar?" Mary saw the message but didn't respond, and about an hour later the police showed up at the venue. I need to add that the police in our country is ruthless and any theft is considered a criminal matter for the police to deal with. Police had asked Chelsea to take the dress and all the jewelry off. Chelsea refused and started arguing with them, and then Adam joined in. Everyone at the wedding had to leave. I had tried to call Mary, but she wouldn't pick up the phone. As we found out later, Chelsea was wearing Mary's wedding dress and her heirlooms. Mary spotted them on her in the picture I sent her and called the police. Apparently, she had previously asked Adam if he had them, and he declined, saying he never saw them. So, after she saw the picture, she knew he was lying and stole them. Chelsea had to leave the wedding dress and jewelry at the police station and go home wearing her underwear and Adam's jacket after they were bailed out. Yesterday, Adam returned to the office and went completely mental at me, blaming me for sending a picture to Mary and ruining his wedding. He would also call me an asshole for what I did.
Storytime about how I saw my best friend's dad on a date with our ex-friend. My best friend Alex and I are both 17 years old. When we were younger, around 11 to 12 years old, we had a friend named Lauren. Alex has a really big house with a lot of cool stuff, so every week we would go over for a sleepover in her den. It would be me, her, Lauren, and a few other girls. Lauren started saying that she had a crush on Alex's dad, which we all thought was weird, but we kind of just ignored it. However, it started getting weirder when she started going into detail about wanting to be with him and have his children. Alex finally had enough and told her that it was going too far. She told her that if she kept saying things like this, then she wouldn't be able to come over anymore. It seemed like it got through to Lauren and everything was fine for a while. We eventually grew apart from Lauren, and even though we were still friends, she stopped hanging out with us over time. She would still talk about Alex's dad though, just not directly to Alex. At one point she even said she had given a BJ to him, but he wasn't even in the country when she said it happened. He was on vacation with Alex and her sisters at the time, so no one believed her. One day I went to a mall kind of far away with my brother and saw Lauren and Alex's dad together. They were being extremely affectionate and I snapped a picture of them because he's still married. This is when my brother told me that it's not our business and we need to stay out of it. Part 2 of how I saw my best friend's dad on a date with our ex-friend. I ended up telling Alex after school and showed her the picture. She immediately wanted to find Lauren and confront her, but once she calmed down, we decided to go to Alex's mom first. Her mom is an extremely calm woman, but when we told her and showed her the picture, she blew up. Apparently, Alex's dad had cheated on her mom before and the girls he's been showing interest in have been getting younger and younger. She's had her suspicions for a while. She calls him and tells him that he needs to get home ASAP. When he arrives, she confronts him and he thinks that it was Lauren who added him, trying to cause issues in his marriage. He starts out by saying Lauren has been causing issues for years and making things up. When she told him it wasn't Lauren who added him and showed him the picture, he flipped out. Alex called me crying and I could hear her parents screaming at each other, so she came to stay with me and my family. Alex's mom kicked her dad out, said it was over, told him he's never seeing the kids again, and topped it off by telling him that she's calling the cops. After this, he started calling Alex and she answered the phone telling him to never call her again and then hung up. This is when Alex's mom calls Lauren's mom to tell her what's been going on. Part 3 of how I saw my best friend's dad on a date with our ex-friend. Once Lauren's mom found out what was going on, she flipped out as well. She had her suspicions something had been going on with Lauren because she was being super secretive and her mom wasn't able to put it together. Alex's mom also told Lauren's mom about the stuff that she used to say. Lauren's mom searched her belongings to try and find any texts and talked to Lauren to find any evidence of their relationship before she was 18. Lauren hasn't been to school since, but she sent me and Alex texts on WhatsApp calling us nasty names and saying that Alex is going to end up a fat C word like her mom. However, Alex and her mom are both gorgeous. She also said that since we outed her relationship, she's going to out me and Alex as gigantic lesbians. We didn't get mad at her because it sounds like some pretty messed up stuff might have happened to her, and we just hope that she gets the help that she needs. Alex and her mom are doing as well as can be expected. Alex's mom got a lawyer and a therapist for Alex. Everyone at school knows what's going on and it's weird for her. A few people are talking about Lauren, but everyone agrees that Alex's dad is the piece of trash here. If they find proof that he did stuff before Lauren was 18, they're going to the cops with the evidence. Alex's mom already called the local department with her suspicions, but more proof is needed. A habit I've had for almost 3 years now is that every day I write down a description of the outfits my friends are wearing. I do this because we go to school together and I see them every day. The exception of when I've done this is when school was virtual or over summers and breaks. I've had the same friends for a while, so the data I have on some of them is dating back to when I started doing this. At first, it was an experiment to see how often people repeat the outfits they wear. If I could find this out, then I know how often it's acceptable for me to repeat an outfit. Then it became a habit and I like doing it. It's cool to see how their styles have changed over the years, and sometimes I can predict what they'd wear based on this data. I also like the routine and going over my findings. My friends have never known that I've done this. I had a friend over yesterday and I went to the bathroom while she was left in my room. I keep all my data on Google Documents and create a new one each month so I can easily copy and paste for chart making. I had left my computer open and the document was pulled up on another tab. On the original tab, my friend and I were watching YouTube. My friend says that she accidentally closed the tab and that's how she found my document. She read through part of it and got really upset, telling me that it's weird. That's when she proceeded to leave and go tell our other friends. They only think that I've been doing this for a month. Am I wrong for tracking their outfits like this? Part 2 of how my friends found out I've been documenting their outfits for 3 years. I asked my friends if I could talk to them, and over the weekend when we were all free, we talked over FaceTime. I explained to them why I started keeping track of their outfits, how long I've done it for, and why I kept doing it. I told them that I was sorry for not telling them and I didn't realize it would make them upset. I told them I'd delete the information if they like and I'll stop doing it if they want me to. 2 of my close friends on the call said that they understood what I was doing better now. They said they didn't really mind that I was recording their outfits, but they would have liked to know first. I promised to run it by them if I do something I think might bother them in the future. They asked for me to show them my data, which I did, and they asked me to send them a copy because they said they honestly found it interesting. My other friend, the one who originally found the data, said that she was a little creeped out by it, but thanked me for explaining. She apologized for reacting so strongly without giving me a chance to explain, and I told her that it's fine and I don't blame her. We're all back to getting along now. My friends are great people. They're a little weird too, which is why we make such great friends. I love them and I'm glad they're so understanding. Lastly, for the people who asked if I have OCD, I'm not sure and I won't be able to get tested until I'm an adult because it's not something my parents would approve of. Fanatic Friday, the 300-pound cannibal. On the morning of February 6, 1996, a young 10-year-old boy named Zachary Ramsey left his home in Great Falls, Montana for his walk to school. However, he never made it. 25 years later, rumors and theories have surrounded his disappearance, but the most common is that Zachary Ramsey met a brutal end at the hands of a cannibal. A man named Nathaniel Bar Jonah was walking alongside the road near a school as a detective detective passed by. The detective noticed Barjona and realized that this man was impersonating a police officer by his blue nylon jacket and fake badge. When looking into Barjona's background, there was an evident thirst for blood. It started when he lured his 5-year-old neighbor to his home and tried to strangle her. He was only 7 years old at the time. When he was 12, he sexually assaulted a 6-year-old. A few years later, he tried to lure 2 boys to a nearby cemetery. Luckily, one of them had a bad feeling about it and convinced the other to leave. Barjona later stated that he was planning on killing the pair. At 18 years old, Barjona abducted and assaulted another young boy, proceeding to strangle him. A witness had seen the abduction take place and called the police. The boy was found near the point of death in his car. Barjona was only sentenced to a year's probation. While on parole, he abducted and assaulted a 9-year-old girl, throwing her out of his vehicle. This never got back to his parole officer, and his tirade didn't stop there. On Fanatic Friday Part 2, The 300-Pound Cannibal. In 1976, Nathaniel Barjona was released from parole. In 1977, he abducted 2 boys from a movie theater, taking them to a secluded area and assaulting them. He tried to strangle one of the boys, driving off when he believed he succeeded. By a miracle, the boy survived and went to get help, leading to Barjona's arrest. This time, he was set to serve 18 to 20 years. He was sent to a state hospital for treatment. At the hospital, he talked about his fantasies about abducting, murdering, and cannibalizing children. However, a judge released him because apparently the state didn't prove Barjona to be dangerous. In 1996, Zachary Ramsey disappeared. There were reports of witnesses seeing an obese adult male following him, along with reports of Ramsey heading into an alleyway in a 4-door car running him over. Despite this, the case went cold. It's largely believed that Barjona was his killer. In the following years, Barjona continued to abduct and assault young boys in his apartment. He would also cook food for his neighbors, which had strange meat in it. When he was arrested in 1999, a search of his home was completed. Police found pictures of children, journals written in code, and a human bone. He also had a list with the names of his victims, and one of the names was Ramsey's. His diary included instructions on how to cook and eat children. He was sentenced to 130 years in prison and died in 2008 at the age of 51. This is why best friends can be abusive too. I had moved to England with my ex around 3 to 4 years ago. We had broken up but remained good friends and just rented a house together. We weren't hostile and learned that we were better as friends than in a relationship. I started going out to local bars and shops to make friends because I didn't know anyone there. This is when I met a guy named Craig who quickly became my best friend. He was a little odd, had family in the area and his own flat. Shortly after meeting Craig, my ex moved back in with his family and I couldn't afford to make rent on my own. This is when Craig and I decided to rent a house together. We weren't romantically or sexually involved, we were strictly just friends. He was the type of guy who always had a few girls in tow, so he'd never be without a love interest. I started seeing a guy named Jay who would stay over a few times throughout the week, eventually becoming my boyfriend. Craig quickly made it known that he hated it. We would argue about him and I made it known to him that we were only friends, so he needed to stay out of my dating life. One night, Craig pounced on me in my room, getting on top. He put his knees on my arms and started to strangle me. He was saying things like, "Where is he now?" And I honestly thought I was about to die. As I felt his grip tighten, I thought of my mom who was only 4 to 5 hours away. I thought of how she'd never know what happened to me or how she'd have to identify the body of her only child. Part 2, why best friends can be abusive too. By some miracle, I kicked Craig off of me and ran for my life. He had double locked the front door, hid in my bag, and smashed my iPhone. I was running down the stairs with him yelling right behind me that he was going to kill me. I knew the back door was open from him having a smoke earlier. I ran for it and made it to the street. I was barefoot, in shorts, and a pajama top. I ran for what felt like ever towards the town. 30 minutes later, I used a payphone and called the police. They picked me up and I told them the story. They took me to the station and took photos of my neck that had bruising along with my head that was bleeding from when he smashed me into the kitchen wall earlier. I sat in the patrol car as I went inside of my house to pick him up. They found him in the streets looking for me. They arrested him and put him in a cell overnight while dropping me off to gather my things. I was terrified he'd be released and come back at any moment, so I grabbed just a few of my things in a rush. I didn't have my phone or any money. I drove to a patrol station bleeding from my head with no shoes and bruised up. I broke down using their phone to call my mom. She was annoyed that I had woken her up at first, but once I explained what happened, she sent me $200 to fill up my tank and get something to drink to calm down. Then I drove to my parents' house. Craig got out in the morning and it was his word against mine. I blocked him on everything and changed my number, cutting off all contact. I sometimes still get flashbacks of that night. I met my ex in college and we started a business right after our senior year. Eventually, our business started having financial troubles. He came from wealth, so I asked him to get a loan from his parents and he agreed. 2 months later, he asked for all the money back. We were always planning to pay it, but mutually decided on manageable installments. He said he needed it because his father was sick, but he wouldn't give details or let me call his mother. The money was already invested in our business. I had to take some out and give away all my personal savings. 3 weeks after this, he called me and ended things. He also wanted out of the business. The only time I saw him was with lawyers when we divided our business assets and he withdrew his name from all the documents. I was devastated, emotionally traumatized, and had no finances to fall back on. I moved back in with my mother and later found out that his father was never sick. 5 years later, I never gave up on my business and it paid off. Now I live a comfortable life. In the midst of lockdown, I got a message from my ex saying that his parents cut him out of their will. He had a child with a woman who left him and he was now struggling to feed his son. He said since he was instrumental to the business foundation, he deserved a cut from it now that it was successful. My lawyer said he has no legal claims to the business. However, my best friend thinks I'm being selfish because he was responsible for the business idea and his initial investment was twice as much as mine. Am I wrong for not wanting to help him out? Part 2 of not wanting to help my ex after he left our business. I found out through friends that both of his parents had passed away during those 5 years that we didn't have contact. After receiving the message from him stating that his parents cut him out of the will and he was struggling to feed his son, I looked into it. I was able to verify that he does indeed have a son, but he wasn't cut out of his parents' will. The money simply just wasn't as much as he was expecting. Even though he did lose his job, he had a lot of money to fall back on. I had done an interview in a local newspaper about my business and I'm guessing my ex may have read it. This is probably how he found out my business was doing so well. Since he didn't need that money, my only explanation for why he reached out to me is that he felt entitled to my success and the money I made. My best friend admitted to me that he reached out to her before he emailed me. After some coaxing, she told me that they had been casually speaking for years. I'm not the most confrontational person, so I just cut her out of my life. I found out yesterday through Facebook that they're engaged. Now I see she was just trying to get me to give my money to her future fiancé. Taking custody of my sister's 3 kids back in 2018 after she left them alone for 2 weeks to go on a drug bender. It was a huge transition for the kiddos because not only did they have to switch schools and daycares, but they also wouldn't be able to see their mother anymore. I've adopted the kids and have full custody of them. They're doing better now and leading happier lives. Recently though, my sister was released from prison and wants to see them. She called me begging to have a visit with them and telling me that I could give them back now because she was out of prison. I've had a talk with the 9-year-old and he says he doesn't want to see his mom yet. He told me that he still hates her for leaving him alone. The girls have no memories of her. The smallest was only 3 months old the last time she saw her. I feel like I could have helped them foster a better relationship with their mom, but I don't want to force them to meet her if they don't want to. My close family has told me that the oldest doesn't know what he's talking about, and it's my fault the little ones don't remember their mother because I didn't take them to see her when she was in prison. They also told me that it's my responsibility to force them to meet her even when they don't want to because it's what's best for them and they shouldn't grow up without their mother. I've spoken to a professional about this and they said it should be up to the kids. Am I being a jerk to my sister by not letting her kids see her if they don't want to? Part 2 of not letting my sister see her kids. I gave my oldest 2 weeks to really think about whether he wanted to see my sister or not. I figured that his original decision might have been made out of anger, so I wanted to give him time to make such an important decision. Ultimately, he decided that he did actually want to talk to her. I was a bit surprised, but we set up a Zoom call between them with me supervising. Right before the call, he admitted to me that he wanted to talk to her just to see if she'd say sorry. She didn't. Instead, she opened the call with, "Hello, it's been so long. I guess you're ready to come home with me now?" That's when she noticed I was sitting there with him. She immediately launched into accusations of alienation, followed by saying if I don't give the kids back, then she'd call the police and say I kidnapped them. My oldest was disgusted and asked her if she was going to apologize to him. She had the audacity to ask what for. At that point, he shut off the Zoom call. I asked him if he was okay, but he spent the rest of the afternoon in his room by himself. That night, he told me that he never wanted to talk to her again. I told him he didn't have to talk to her again if he didn't want to, and we'd never give him back over to her. Before now, I honestly never considered myself as their parent, even after legally adopting them. Now I realize those kids are my kids and they're going to be for the rest of my life. This is why you might not want to use Facebook to find a roommate. My sister and I work in the medical field and we're renting a house together. The rent was pretty high and we quickly decided that it would be helpful if we got a roommate. However, after weeks of looking, we still couldn't find anyone. My sister and I were desperate and posted in the Facebook groups about needing a roommate. This woman in her late 30s named Tammy answered and we were excited that we had found our new roommate. When we met her and talked to her, everything seemed normal. She seemed nice and put together. My sister's in residency and I'm in nursing school, so we made it clear that we needed a respectful roommate who understood our schedules. When she first moved in, everything seemed to be going well. After the first week, I had a friend come over to hang out. While my friend was there, Tammy came into my room and introduced herself. I could smell the alcohol on her breath as she spoke and she started hitting on my friend. She kept telling her how she was down for hot girl bye shit. She was doing this all while aggressively petting my labradoodle. Luckily, my friend just laughed it off and we assumed that she was drunk. Then Tammy went to her room and after about 10 minutes, we started hearing moaning coming from her room. She didn't have any guests over and we tried to ignore it at first, but the moaning escalated to screaming. We could hear things being thrown around in the room as well. After 20 minutes of this, we got worried and went to get my sister. Part 2, why you might not want to use Facebook to find a roommate. My sister talked to Tammy and she apologized, saying she was just sleeping. About 2 weeks later, my sister stayed at her boyfriend's house and I was stuck with Tammy. I made myself dinner and I was eating, and that's when Tammy came downstairs. She was blasted drunk again and went to the stove. She started reheating my food, and that's when I asked her if she wanted some, but she said she was just stirring my food for me. After I ate my dinner, I went to look and she had taken all of it. Over time, I noticed she would eat our food without permission, even when I asked her not to. When I'd call her out on it, she would lie and say she didn't touch my food. We used to keep our liquor in the kitchen, but she started drinking from the bottles and we had to move them to our rooms. She would go into my room because I had a bottle of liquor and she drank it, then fill it up with water. However, it was easy to tell because it was whiskey. One night I was studying for one of my exams and I hear loud screaming. I assumed it was coming from her room, but when I opened my door, I realized it was coming from outside. I went downstairs and saw her laying on the floor of the backyard, screaming her head off. I told her that she was being loud and the neighbors would call the cops. She got up and apologized and then went to her room. However, she repeated this again a couple days later. Just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, it did. 3, why you might not want to use Facebook to find a roommate. A week after she started screaming in the backyard, my sister and I decided that we needed to get her out. We had a house meeting and told Tammy that she has a month to move out. At first, she was crying and upset, acting like she didn't know what she did wrong, but then she accepted it. However, the last month with her was the worst month of my life. I was concluding the semester at nursing school and it was about to be finals. She started eating me and my sister's packed lunches out of our lunch boxes. She also started breaking dishes on purpose, leaving the glass where our corgi and labradoodle would play. When I confronted her about it, she blew it off saying that it was an accident and hadn't gone around to cleaning it. One night, she sat me and my sister down threatening to sue us because we were trying to get rid of her during COVID. My sister wasn't having it and told her to get her lawyer. I installed 7 cameras in the house because I couldn't trust her while we weren't there and I was worried for our dogs. She would put her cigarette butts and ashes in our dog's food bowl, so I knew I needed to watch her. Whenever I checked the cameras, she was always up to something like eating our food, looking through our things, and going into our bedrooms when we weren't around. The craziest part of all of this is when she finally moved out and we saw her room. It was a complete mess. There was menstrual blood all over the carpet, scratches on the wall, and she left a painting that she had done of our house burning while she walked away. Story time about how I found out my husband was cheating on me with his stepsister and her best friend. My husband and I had been married for 5 years. We were living in another state when he was fired from work and my job wasn't paying well enough. We decided to move in with his family until we could figure things out and get back on our feet. He had a stepsister and she was drop dead gorgeous. Since he didn't have a job, he would spend most of his time at home while I dropped off our son at daycare and then went to work. When I would get home, he'd go to the bar. At first, I thought things were normal and he was just stressed out about not being able to find work. However, I started getting suspicious once he started being a little aggressive towards me. He stopped wanting to talk to me as often and barely slept next to me anymore. His parents planned a trip to Europe and asked us to take care of the house while they were gone, to which we agreed. I noticed whenever I wasn't home, he would be home alone with his stepsister, and whenever I got back, they would both leave. I also noticed he wasn't trying very hard to find a job, leaving all the responsibilities to me. One day I was calling him while I was at work and he wasn't picking up. I had a bad feeling and asked my boss if I could leave early. Thankfully, my boss was nice and let me go. When I got home, I heard 2 girls giggling and the sound of a guy huffing coming from our room upstairs. What I saw next left me devastated. Part 2 of how I found out my husband was cheating on me with his stepsister and her best friend. When I came home and heard the sounds coming from our room upstairs, my blood was rushing through my body. I quietly went up the stairs and found my husband screwing his stepsister and her best friend at the same time. I was so devastated and heartbroken. I didn't know what to do, so I quickly rushed out of the house and went back to work. When I didn't return home that night, my husband called me asking why I was late and started accusing me of cheating. That's when I realized that none of them had seen me earlier and decided to get back at him. Earlier that day when I returned to work, my boss asked me if I was okay because he noticed my eyes were red from crying. I broke down, and you know how the saying goes, a shoulder to cry on becomes a deed to ride on. When I told him what I saw, he told me to file for divorce and make him pay for the nasty deed. He also told me that he'd be by my side and would take care of everything, including a place for me and my son to stay. I went home that night like nothing was wrong and acted like things were okay. The next day came and I went home early again to catch him in the act. This time I recorded footage of him cheating for evidence. In the end, I got a divorce, money, and full custody of my son. Now I'm married to my boss, living in a big house with someone who deeply loves and respects me. Story time about the weirdest things to happen while working as a stripper. I was giving a $25 dance in a busy room filled with other dancers. It was the room for the cheap customers, so there weren't any dividers. Just a big room filled with armchairs and people watching each other get private dances. At this specific club, dancers were required to remove our shoes during private dances so we wouldn't damage the armchairs. We usually put our shoes and whatever else under the chair so that nobody would mess with them while we were busy. After the private dances, my guy and the guy next to me are the only ones to buy a second dance. The rest of the girls clear out and it's just me and another girl. When I look over, the other guy is sniffing the sole of the girl's shoe behind her back while she's grinding on him. We make eye contact and he drops her shoe. I don't want to ruin my own private dance by saying something, so I ignored it and just continued to do my thing. They were only 3 feet away, so it was hard not to notice things. I look over again and he's doing it again. He noticed me looking and dropped the shoe, looking away. Finally, a third time I look over and this dude is giving the heel of her stripper shoe a freaking BJ, all while making eye contact with me. This time he holds eye contact and intensely stares at me. That's when I got creeped out and avoided him the rest of the night. I also never told the girl that her shoe had been defiled. Part 2 of the weirdest things to happen while working as a stripper. One night, there was an older gentleman around 55 years old buying lots of double dances. He was tipping generously and even buying everyone in the bar a round of drinks at some point. It was around 1 in the morning when this large, curly, red-haired lady smashes down onto the push and door lever as hard as humanly possible. Every patron in the club turned and looked at the door. She stood there in all her glory with a red fried perm, mom jeans, and thick frame glasses. I could instantly tell that she was seething with anger. She was on a mission and stormed towards the back of the club where the VIP rooms were, all while shouting, Derek, where the F are you?" The bouncer immediately notices and runs towards the back, trying to stop her from causing any problems. However, it was too late. She swings the VIP room door open and sees him in there with 2 girls getting a double dance. She immediately grabs him by the arm and starts yanking him towards the door, all while smacking him repeatedly. She pulls him out into the parking lot and then into her car. That was the last we ever saw of generous soul Derek. Story time about how my carefree friend got rich by listening to the universe. I have a friend named Paige who's a free spirit. She believes in going with the flow, not stressing and letting the universe decide what happens next. I've always been more of a planner and kind of a workaholic. Paige always said that I work too hard and need to relax. She'd say I stress about things too much and the universe already has a plan for me, so I should let it run its course, but I never listened. I've had 2 jobs and I've been in school full-time for as long as I can remember. I always believe that if you want something, you have to work hard for it and make it happen. I never believed in just sitting back and waiting for things to happen for me or leaving it up to the universe, as she'd often preach. However, maybe I should have slowed down and taken her advice. Over a few years, Paige and I drifted apart. She messaged me one day telling me that she was coming back to town and she'd like to visit me while she's here. I was absolutely shocked when she pulled up in a brand new Tesla. Paige never really cared about money and didn't really work besides selling her natural healing oils, which paid okay but nothing crazy. I hopped in and noticed she also had an expensive designer bag, eco-friendly of course, and expensive jewelry on. When I asked her where she got all this from, she told me that the universe got it for her, which is something that I'd expect her to say, but it didn't make any sense. What she was about to tell me changed my outlook on things and made me think that Paige's ideas and beliefs weren't so far-fetched after all. Part 2 about how my carefree friend got rich by listening to the universe. Paige told me how she always knew things would work out and the universe would take care of her if she did her part. She told me she got all of this money by being nice to the earth and catering to Mother Nature, which still made absolutely no sense to me. It sounded good, but I knew that the money didn't just fall into her lap from the sky for being nice to the planet and believing that the universe would take care of her. Upon further questioning, she finally explained that the universe told her to invest half of her money into something she believed in and donate the other half. She said she had been putting half of her money into solar power and eco-friendly stocks and donating the other half to environmental activists over the years. Paige believed that since she was doing her part to care for the planet planet was caring for her back. Well, it turns out that the stocks that she invested in for years blew up. She made enough money to live comfortably for the rest of her life. To be honest, I was in complete shock. I always thought her carefree attitude and laid-back lifestyle wouldn't get her too far, but I turned out to be completely wrong. She ended up doing way better than me, all while working and stressing a lot less. Since then, I've taken a page from Paige's book. I worry a lot less about the little things and try to enjoy my life with her same stress-free attitude. Maybe with this way of thinking, the universe will look out for me next. Or maybe she just got lucky. Storytime about how half of my coworkers got fired after management found our hidden break room. I used to work for a department store a few years back. One day one of my coworkers pointed out a door in the back room, hidden off in the corner, and asked if anyone knows what's back there. Feeling adventurous, we asked the shift lead we were cool with to come with us and unlock it. It led to what appeared to be an electrical room, and behind that there was another door that led to a huge storage area that no one knew about. The storage room had old dusty promotional displays from 10 years ago and other random items that looked ancient, leading us to believe that no one had been back there in quite some time. The three of us started sneaking off and taking our breaks in the storage room, slowly inviting coworkers we trusted to come hang out. We ended up making it our secret break room that only some of us knew about. However, the secret didn't last long. Rumors of a secret hangout spot started traveling around the back room pretty quickly. Slowly but surely, more and more of our coworkers started frequenting our secret hangout spot. One night, a few of the guys snuck in a bottle of alcohol and it turned into a 10-minute break of passing the bottle around while the song Shots played on someone's iPhone. There were also rumors about the overnight shift finding the secret break room and sneaking in to do the nasty. I knew management would find out soon, and sure enough, they did. What they found back there was enough to fire half of my coworkers. Part 2 about how half my coworkers got fired after management found our hidden break room. With word traveling fast about the crazy things going on in the secret break room, I knew it was also a matter of time before management heard about the rumors being spread. I decided to stop taking my breaks in there with the others because I had a feeling that we were about to get raided. For a few weeks, it was fine, and I kept hearing more and more stories about what was going on in the hidden room, especially during the overnight shifts. It was being used as a spot to hang out, drink on the job with friends, sleep during your break, and apparently sleep with others while at work as well. As I predicted, management heard about the craziness and decided to pop in at peak hidden break room hours one day, which led to a lot of people getting fired. Apparently, they went in and found coworkers doing party drugs and of course fired them on the spot. This led to a drug test for everyone on shift, which some of my coworkers failed. I guess word didn't get to the overnight shift, or they just didn't care, because management popped in again at the dead of night and found another guy sound asleep in there, complete with a pillow and blanket from the store. All the firings led to us being super short staffed right in time for peak season. OGs that are still working at the store years later tell the tale about the secret break room to all the newbies to this day. Most of them think it's just an old wives' tale, but the old timers like me know it's a fact and a classic store legend. I'm Fanatic Friday, an author whose best-selling book led to his demise. In the southwest corner of Poland, on a cold December day in 2000, three friends were casting when one of them noticed something floating by the shore. At first, they thought it was a log, but as it drew closer, they quickly discovered that it was a dead body. The police were called and the corpse was carefully removed from the water. A noose was around his neck and his hands were bound behind his back. The rope had once connected his hands to his neck, binding this man in a backward cradle. This position was excruciating, as the slightest movement would have caused the noose to tighten further. A pathologist reported that this man had been starved before he was murdered and was still alive when he was dropped into the water. The victim was 35-year-old Dariusz Janiszewski, who lived 60 miles from where his body was discovered. A major investigation was launched, but after 6 months and no leads, the case went cold. 3 years later, a detective picked up the case and was determined to solve it. He retraced Janiszewski's last steps and found out that he had met up with a customer for business outside of the office but couldn't find out who it was. At one point, the detective realized that Janiszewski's phone was never found. He knew that cell phones often bear a serial number from the manufacturer and soon found a match with the receipt obtained from Janiszewski's wife. What he found next shocked everyone. Fanatic Friday Part 2, an author whose best-selling book led to his demise. After the detective searched the serial number for the missing phone, he found that it had been sold on an internet auction site just 4 days after Janiszewski disappeared. Investigators quickly found the seller to be 30-year-old Polish author Christian Bala. The detective checked Bala's background and discovered a recently published novel called Amok. This crime novel quickly became a bestseller in Poland. It was about a bored Polish intellectual who murders a female lover for no reason and conceals the act so well that he's never caught. When the detective read the book, he found many details about the murder in the novel eerily familiar. The method of the noose that was tied and the weapon that was sold on the internet website was similar to the phone being sold. This detail was never released to the public by police and was too extraordinary to be a coincidence. However, the detective knew that this alone wasn't enough evidence. The only thing tying Bala to the crime was the cell phone. When they searched his profile on the online auction, they made a curious discovery. He had looked for a book about strangulation and tying a noose. As they dug deeper, questioning people close to Bala, prosecutors believed the motive for killing was tied to jealousy. Bala had assumed that his estranged wife was having an affair with Janiszewski. He was sentenced in 2007 and found guilty. He's serving a 25-year sentence. Storytime about my paranormal experience in the mountains. My best friend and I live by some canyons in California. We love to take day trips in the canyons to get away from the city noises. We are always cautious of where we park and who's around us when we go because it's always just the two of us. At this time, we were 17 and had driven all the way up to the top where the road was blocked off. We parked, kicked back, rolled down the windows, and enjoyed the fresh breeze in silence. Since we were pretty high up in the mountains, there weren't any homes, stores, and especially no phone or radio service. The little parking place was basically the edge of the mountain, so if anyone was to fall, they'd go straight down to their demise. There weren't any bushes or trees to break any falls. After about 30 minutes of relaxing, we hear what sounds like a woman groaning in pain. We look at each other in confusion because there wasn't anyone around and the next parking spot was another 10-minute drive down. It was around 7 p.m. and the sun was already setting. We ignored the sound since we only heard it once, but after about 15 minutes, we talked about the noise and decided to try and figure out what it could be out of curiosity. Right then, we heard it again, but it was louder. We thought someone might be hurt, but again, no one should be around because there weren't any walking trails and it was impossible for anyone to be below or above. This is when we stupidly got out of the car and used our cell phone flashlights to look around. Two of my paranormal experience in the mountains. We double-checked to see if anyone was there, but we saw nothing. That's when my friend called to me, telling me that she had a bad feeling. Right before I had the chance to ask her about what, her body jolts closer to the edge of the mountain. At first, I thought she was pulling a prank, but the look on her face was of pure shock, followed by her bursting out in tears. I started to panic and tried to calm her down, but from a distance coming up the road, seemingly out of nowhere, we saw an older man limping towards us. He had dirty, torn-up clothes on. There wasn't any blood or noticeable injuries on him, but the fact that he was limping towards us alone and far away from any trails creeped us out. I snapped my friend out of it and we ran to our car. We locked the doors and pulled out of the parking lot. The man was nowhere in sight as we made our exit. After about 20 minutes driving back down, we see the same man limping. There was no way he could beat us going down the road. I asked my friend what happened earlier and why she was crying. She said she felt the urge to jump and felt like someone had pushed her. The next day, a friend tells us that apparently a month prior to this incident, a man, his wife, and only daughter had died up there. No one knows exactly what happened, but the woman's body was found at the bottom. The man's body was found in a car crash where we saw him the first time, and the daughter's body was nowhere to be found. Storytime about how a stranger hunted me through a national park. I was camping in the middle of nowhere in Washington near Mount Rainier. Not the official campground, just way out in the forest where I wouldn't have expected to see another human for miles. One night, I wake up and hear something. I open my tent and was surprised to see a guy sitting where my fire had been, right outside of my tent. He looked like a regular guy, but he was sitting just a couple feet away from my tent and it made me uneasy. I also noticed that he didn't have a bag or pack or anything with him. When he saw me open my tent, his eyes widened like he had just seen a ghost and he bolted off. It shook me to my core at first, but over the next day I managed to put it out of my mind. I thought to myself that it was just an odd occurrence and that guy was probably on drugs or something. I made myself believe that he had somehow managed to set up a camp not far from mine and it was just a coincidence. 2 days after this, I had hiked another 15 miles in totally random directions that nobody could take the same path as on accident. I was sitting by the fire that night and I started hearing noises. I was convinced there was someone there. I called out to them and out of the darkness, someone asked me, "Do you know how to get to Bell's Canyon?" I quickly said no and I don't even think that's a real place there. However, they kept talking to me from just out of my line of vision. It only got creepier from here. Two about a stranger hunting me through a national park. I grabbed my flashlight and tried to see them, but they yelled at me to aim it away. This spooked me, and not wanting to piss off a potentially crazy person, I did. After about 15 minutes, the voice was still asking me random questions from the darkness. I was so freaked out and it sounded like it had gotten closer. I built up the courage and shined my light in the direction that the voice was coming from. It was the same dude who had been outside my tent 2 nights before. I realized that he had to have followed me almost 15 miles over 2 days because there was no way that he could have just accidentally wound up in the same spot in such a vast wilderness. At this point, I knew it was no coincidence. As soon as my light hit him, he took off again. This time I started to chase him, but I didn't want to get lost in the wilderness in the dark and stopped after only 100 to 200 feet. I decided the trip was over the next morning and hiked back over 3 days, constantly doubling back and trying to throw anyone off my trail. I would also occasionally hide and wait to see if he would come by following me. On the first night hiking out, I heard what sounded like a person walking in circles outside of my tent twice, but by the time I mustered the courage to look, there was nothing. The whole hike back I had knots in my stomach. I almost cried when I finally got back to my car and the relief washed over me. More time about my scariest experience being home alone. When I was 14, I lived with my grandparents. They lived in an old bungalow type of house. It was one story and we had stairs that went right up to the attic. No one ever used the attic and it was just used to store things. My room door was near the stairs leading up to the attic, which I hated because I always got scared something would crawl down when I left my room. One night, my grandparents had to pick up my aunt's family from the airport. They wouldn't be back until early morning. I told them that I'd be safe at home overnight. We lived in a gated community with guard dogs and I thought everything would be okay. Before they left, we had an early dinner and I was stuck doing the dishes. While I was doing this, I could hear the neighboring dogs barking a lot, but I didn't think much of it because they always did that. After cleaning, I locked every window, shut off the lights, and headed to bed. When I entered my room, the lights were on and everything looked completely normal. I had barred and tinted windows because my grandparents didn't want anyone peeping in my room since it was a one-story house. They were barred because when my uncle was younger, he'd always sneak out, so they put bars on the window to prevent him from doing that. When I turned off the lights to go to bed, I saw a silhouette of a man illuminated by the streetlights standing outside of my window. I thought I was hallucinating. When I turned on the lights, he was gone. When I turned them off, he was there. Two of my scariest experience when I was home alone. When I turned the lights on and off the third time, the man's figure wasn't there either time. I sighed in relief and thought my mind was just playing tricks on me or that something was casting a shadow. I double locked my door to be safe with one on the doorknob and one of those latch-type locks. I tucked myself in bed and tried to fall asleep even though the dogs were still barking outside. When I was finally falling asleep, I heard something above me moving, something in the attic. I pushed the thought down and hugged my pillow, telling myself it was just rats. My heart sank when I heard someone hurriedly go down the stairs and stop at the bottom. I covered myself with a blanket and waited, wishing my grandparents had given me a phone for a time like this. Suddenly, I heard my doorknob being gently fiddled. I wanted to vomit vomit when I heard a click followed by a quiet turn of the knob. It turned, but it didn't budge. When they noticed, they tried to push it. I finally stood up and softly pushed my body against the door, locking everything up again. I didn't want to make a sound. I don't know why they stopped, but they did. Then I heard footsteps go up the stairs as I sat there. I saw something move in the corner of my eye, and there outside of my window was the shadow. I forced my eyes closed and ignored it until I fell asleep. All I remember is the next day I was having breakfast with my family. I brought it up to my grandparents, but they scoffed that it was probably rats. I never brought it up again, but the attic window had been opened. That's why you never truly know someone. When I was 10 years old, I met my best friend. We were pretty much inseparable. All throughout school, we were always by each other's side. Our last names both started with J, so we had almost every class together. He was a smart kid and a model student. However, his home life wasn't the best. He also had ADHD and was bipolar. My family was like a second family to him. As we grew into adults, our views differed on what we wanted to do with our lives. He had his first child when he was 18 and split up with the child's mom, so the thought of college never sat well with him. He worked a 9-to-5 job instead to support himself. By 21, he met another woman and had a child with her. This time he was doing good. He stayed with her and was taking care of both of his children. I was really proud of him for stepping up and getting his life together. Suddenly, something inside him flipped like a switch. He randomly up and left that woman and moved to another state. I hadn't spoken to him for 2 months after he did this. One late night, I was woken up by a phone call from his mother saying that he was in jail. I asked what for, and she told me that he raped a 15-year-old girl. He was caught and sent to jail. He was serving 2 years behind bars only because there were texts from that girl saying that she was 18 years old. 2.5 years went by when he finally got out. I told him he could stay with me until he was back on his feet, but he refused. Then things took a dark turn. 2, why you truly never know someone. He decided to stay with my mom for a month instead. Every day I would message and check up on him. I would always get the same vague answer saying that he's good and thanking us for helping him out. One day, my mom called me in a panic state. She told me that he was in his room with a knife and threatening to unalive himself. I immediately drove over and talked him down, taking the knife away from him. Later that night, I called to check up on him because I was worried. He didn't answer. I called my mom to check on him and she said that he was in his room. I asked her to go check, and when she did, he was nowhere to be found. Later, we found out where he had gone that night. Apparently, he walked over to his ex-girlfriend's house to spy on her and her boyfriend. I'm not sure what shifted in him, but he walked behind the house and ripped off a piece of his shirt. He stuffed the ripped shirt in a crack of the window and set the fabric on fire. Then he just walked away. He attempted to kill his child, ex-girlfriend, and an unknown man. Luckily, no one was harmed because the adults in the house were still awake and smelled the fire. They quickly got the children to safety and called the fire department. My best friend admitted to this and has since been in jail. After this, I stopped all contact. It's been 9 years. It's crazy to think that the closest person to you can have a deep dark side and there's nothing you can do about it. Friday, how bullying led to a young girl's murder. Rena Verk was a 14-year-old girl who came from an Indian background and desperately wanted to be accepted amongst her peers. She felt restricted by the rules of her family's faith as Jehovah's Witnesses. Due to peer pressure, she began to rebel. She started smoking and in 1996 falsely reported her father of sexual molestation in hopes of being moved into a foster home for more freedom. As a result, she was moved from her family's home into the care of the state for several months. The charges were later dropped and she returned home. One evening on a Friday in November of 1997, Rena was invited to a party by her friend near a bridge. Shortly after this, Rena was swarmed with a group later known as the Shoreline Six. A rumor had broken out about Rena trying to steal one of the girl's boyfriends. That specific girl confronted Rena and put out a cigarette on her forehead while 7 to 8 others watched. They cornered her and repeatedly hit, punched, and kicked her. Rena cried out in pain and said that she was sorry repeatedly. Finally, one of the girls told the others to stop and the first beating ended. Rena staggered across the bridge toward her home. However, a couple members of the group followed her. Kelly Ellard, who was 15 at the time, and Warren Glowatsky, who was 16. They forced Rena to remove her shoes and jacket and started beating on her a second time. Friday Part 2, how bullying led to a young girl's murder. The pair beat 14-year-old Rena Verk and smashed her head against the tree where she fell unconscious. They dragged her body into the gorge waterway and drowned her. Rena's parents reported her missing, but sadly, her body wasn't discovered for another 8 days. The coroner's report showed extensive damage and said that she would have most likely died from her injuries if she hadn't been drowned. She was found to have several cigarette burns on her skin and attempts were even made to set her hair on fire. The 6 girls who took part in the initial attack were prosecuted in youth court with their identities protected. Ellard and Glowatsky were charged with Rena's murder and tried as adults despite their ages. Glowatsky was convicted of second-degree murder and and sentenced to life in prison. Ellard was also convicted, but it took 3 tries to finally get her served a life sentence due to difficult circumstances. Lowatsky took responsibility for his crimes and participated in restorative justice programs, including indigenous healing circles aimed to reconcile offenders and victims. He issued an apology to Rena's parents and they accepted it, exchanging tearful hugs. Lowatsky's parole was accepted in 2010 because of this. Ellard never showed any remorse, maintaining her innocence. She was also released on parole, allowing her to live 5 days away from a residential facility. Storytime about the most outrageous thing I saw working as a waitress. A guy came in with his date one night and throughout the evening he was the picture of courtesy and good manners. I appreciated it, but didn't delude myself that I was the source and figured he was just in a good mood because the date was going well. He was certainly in a celebratory mood because he was sparing no expense. He asked for our highest quality wine, she got our most expensive entree, and he even ordered one of every appetizer for her to sample when she made a remark that she was having trouble deciding. It was a real feast. So the evening starts wrapping up and I get their check. I asked if they'd be paying together or separate and she starts to say separate, but he makes a big deal of saying, "Oh, are you kidding me? Together, definitely together. You never have to pay when you're with me, babe." Then he slides me his card. I get everything sorted and bring out the receipt. It's almost a $300 bill. He doesn't even blink and makes a big show of leaving a $100 tip. He thanks me for my service and emphasizes what a lovely night they've had. A tip that size is exceptional, so I thanked him profusely. He said there's no need and goes on to say how underappreciated waitstaff are and says, "Don't plan to tip, don't eat out, you know?" Looking at the mesmerized girl the whole time and not giving me a glance. After that, he helps her into her coat and they go off. However, not even a few minutes later, he comes back and what he says leaves me speechless. Part 2 of the most outrageous thing I saw while working as a waitress. So about 90 seconds later, he's back in the door without her, going, "I think I left my..." Then when the door shut and looking to make sure she was out of earshot, he goes, without the slightest shade of shame or embarrassment, "Mark the tip down to $20, hun. I was just playing it up for my date. You understand." Then turns to leave. I understood, but not how he hoped I would. However, I couldn't make a scene in the middle of work. That's not my place, so I just said one more time in order to give his conscience a chance to sink in. "Okay, sir, you'd like to amend your tip from $100 to $20, is that correct?" Even though I didn't show any displeasure in my voice, he shot back extremely hostile, "Yes, and if I see a cent over 20 on there, I'm going to dispute the whole meal with my credit vendor, so don't try to pull anything." The most frustrating part of this for me was not even going from over a 30% tip to a 10% tip, but rather that this poor girl was being strung along with no idea of who this guy was behind her back. It was extremely manipulative of him, which is a major red flag. I really wanted to show that girl the trick he just pulled, but I was at work and it wasn't my place. However, just in time, something occurred to me and I darted outside hoping to catch him in the parking lot. Part 3 of the most outrageous thing I saw while working as a waitress. I got lucky because he parked on the street and he was dealing with the parking meter. I flagged him down and ran across the street, nearly stumbling into traffic in my haste for this delicious moment. His date was already in the car but rolled her window down since no one expects the waitress to follow you to your car waving her arms like a crazy person. I made it across and said more than loudly enough for her to hear, "Sir, we amended your tip from $100 down to $20 as you requested, but you'll need to fill out a different receipt reflecting your new total for our records. This is just a bookkeeping regulation that goes way above me. It has nothing to do with you retroactively downgrading your tip from $100 to $20. We're just glad you enjoyed your evening." His jaw was on the floor. He tried to pretend like he didn't know what I was talking about, giving me some line about how I must be after someone else since he only came back because he forgot his keys. However, I wouldn't let it rest. The more he played dumb, the more I repeated versions of, "You wanted me to change your tip from $100 to $20, you came back in," and so on. He finally went, "Okay, whatever, sorry for the miscommunication. If you need me to fill out a new receipt, I can." I'm guessing he didn't have the money in his account because he signed the new receipt. His girlfriend was visibly shocked and he was staring daggers through me. You could feel the rage emanating off of him. Then they drove off. Hopefully he'll never do that again.